Your Royal Highness, Your Highness, Lords, Ladies and Gentlemen, it's wonderful to see you here this morning at this conference marking the 50th anniversary of ICOMOS UK. I'm not going to say more than a very few words, but just to introduce the morning session to you. We will start with the opening of the conference from His Royal Highness the Duke of Gloucester, followed by a keynote speech from His Highness the Aga Khan, and two distinguished speeches from international perspectives. Can I please now hand over to Greg Hodkinson, Chairman of ARUPS, who's going to welcome us from ARUPS.
Thank you very much. Your Royal Highness, Your Highness, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to ARUP, and welcome to this, what promises to be very important, very interesting conference. ARUP is 70 years old next year, founded by a Dane in London in 1946. And I think it's fair to say established as a firm along modernist principles. Part of that modernist principle relates to how the firm is governed. Indeed, it's owned in trust for all of the colleagues who work in it and have worked in it, so colleagues present and past. And now, a firm founded on modernist principles is also a firm that cares very much for cultural heritage, and particularly, in our case, cultural heritage in the built environment. Because although our mission is to shape a better world, a part of that mission includes cherishing, restoring and preserving our cultural heritage. And we're very proud of the work that we do in that area, and very pleased, therefore, to be able to host this conference today. Just last week, I was very pleased to receive the British Construction Industries Award for the Best International Project of the Year in Lower Manhattan, which involved the restoration there of a prototype for skyscrapers, the first indeed tall, it is 10 floors, first indeed tall building in New York. So welcome. I wish you much success in your conference today.
Thank you, Greg. I'd now like to introduce His Royal Highness the Duke of Gloucester, who's going to give us our opening remarks.
Thank you, Chairman. We are here today as ICOMOS UK, and ICOMOS are 50 years old. ICOMOS, the International Council on Monuments and Sites, is a global non-governmental organization which has a special role as official advisor to UNESCO on cultural World Heritage sites. Its mission is to promote the conservation, protection, use and enhancement of monuments, building complexes and sites. ICOMOS UK is the UK National Committee of ICOMOS, an independent charity with a UK-wide and international mission to promote and support best practice in the conservation, care and understanding of the historic environment. It plays a vital role in advising on aspects of World Heritage sites for nomination across the United Kingdom. We are not here just to celebrate that first half-century. Rather, this conference is about the opportunity to build on what has been achieved and to look forward to the challenges that lie ahead, not just for ICOMOS UK, but for the wider conservation community, and to begin to consider how these might be addressed. Cultural heritage must continue to be an essential component of a successful society. It should play a pivotal role as a driver of development and of sustainable cultural tourism, a major global industry, and most importantly, be seen as a key component of our cultural identity and sense of well-being. It embodies a spirit of place and can provide inspiration for the communities and people to which it belongs. Crucially, its value lies in the ordinary as well as the extraordinary. Cultural heritage has a profound impact on our lives, but it is as vulnerable as we have seen so vividly in recent times in Syria, Yemen, and Mali. The past has always had a role to play in guiding us through the future. The architectural past gives us a direct link with our forebears and enables us to share an environmental experience with previous generations that is different from the description from the records we can find in books. History is not just for historians. It speaks to every man, if only he can be persuaded to listen and understand. In its 50th anniversary year, ICOMOS UK is calling for a new approach that celebrates cultural heritage and seeks to embed it in sustainable development as a major part of resilience in society. This afternoon, we'll be launching a cultural heritage manifesto, not just for ICOMOS UK, but as a document that might contribute to the wider debate on how cultural heritage could be given a higher profile in society. The programme has been structured to allow you to take part in discussions, first at the end of the morning in the plenary session, and then in the afternoon, when you are invited to help codify an action plan to implement our manifesto. This morning's discussion will be about the value of cultural heritage to society and how we quantify that value. In order to inform that debate, we have three speakers, two to provide international perspectives, and the third, a national view. It is my great pleasure to introduce the first speaker, His Highness the Aga Khan. His Highness the Aga Khan is the 49th hereditary Imam, or spiritual leader, of the Shia Ismaili Muslims. In the context of his hereditary responsibilities, His Highness has been deeply engaged with the development of countries around the world for close to 60 years through the work of the Aga Khan Development Network, or AKDN. Active in over 30 countries, the AKDN employs some 80,000 people with the support of tens of thousands of volunteers. Its areas of focus include the provision of quality healthcare and education services, cultural and economic revitalization, micro-enterprise, entrepreneurship and economic development, the advancement of civil society and the protection of the environment. In recognition of his exceptional efforts and contributions to human development and improving the social condition of societies globally, the Aga Khan has, over the last 6 decades, received numerous decorations, honorary degrees, and awards from institutions and the nations across the world. Recently, His Highness contributed a key presentation to the UNESCO Conference on Culture Development in Hangzhou, China, on integrating cultural heritage into the post-millennium goals development agenda. And we are delighted that today he has agreed to share his enormous experience and wisdom with us here in London on his integrated multi-sector approach to cultural heritage and development.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Your Royal Highness, the Duke of Gloucester, Mr. David Thackeray, President of ICOMOS UK, Mr. Gregory Hodkinson, Chairman Arup, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. What a pleasure it is for me to be marking with you the 50th anniversary of ICOMOS. Happy birthday. Yours is an organization for which I have long had enormous respect. And I have noted with interest the impressive recent development of your Cultural Heritage Manifesto. The creation of ICOMOS 50 years ago came during my first decade as Imam of the Shia Ismaili Muslim community. And from the start, many of my interests have closely resembled yours. All Muslims are called upon to improve the physical condition of our world. And honoring our cultural heritage is vital to that calling. Our response in simple terms is that not a day goes by where my institution, the Ismaili Imamate, is not building or rebuilding something somewhere. A historic site, perhaps, but also a hospital, a university, and industry. Our central objective is to improve the quality of life for people in the developing world, and it is from this perspective that I will speak to you today. Our work extends to 35 countries in fields such as education and medical care, job creation and energy production, media and tourism, the fine arts and microfinance. We believe that by improving the largest numbers of variables in the shortest possible time, we can obtain stable, long-term improvement in the quality of human life. Cultural heritage, of course, plays a central role in this endeavor. This focus was sharply intensified for me some 40 years ago, when I came to realize that the proud architectural heritage of the Islamic world was progressively vanishing. The physical legacy of great Muslim empires was collapsing, and the response in the Islamic world seemed to be oblivion. What was in fashion, what was prized and taught throughout the Islamic architectural world, increasingly reflected Western preoccupations. Quality was viewed as Occidentalization. We searched throughout the Muslim world for any serious mention of Islamic architectural history and found none. There were no processes for revival, just the occasional misplaced dome or minaret. Our time-honored cultural heritage had been buried, obscured not only by the shifting sands of time, but also by an all-consuming Occidentalization. As one observer commented, the physical identity of the Islamic world had been reduced to coffee table books. It was out of these concerns that the Aga Khan Award for Architecture was established in 1977, followed by the Aga Khan Trust for Culture and its Historic Cities program. And as our agenda grew over time, and most excitingly, we also came to another critical understanding. We began to see the added potential of heritage projects for advancing an economic and a social agenda, for fighting poverty and driving development. To be sure, this potential was often ignored, as culture was too easily mislabeled as a luxury amid pressing social and economic needs. But my colleagues and I became convinced that cultural heritage projects are not a diversion from development priorities. Culture is, in and of itself, a development resource of immense potential value. Some who share this view refer to cultural investments as a springboard for development. Similarly, I like to say that cultural heritage can be a trampoline, propelling dramatic improvements in the quality of human life. I have seen this trampoline in action, again and again. One of my earliest such experiences came 3 decades ago at a conference on urban growth in Cairo, a city founded by my own ancestors 1,000 years ago. As we looked out over medieval Cairo that week, one glaring anomaly stood out. A stretch of barren land, some 30 hectares, covered largely in heaps of debris. What an amazing surprise. In a city that was 1,046 years old and as densely populated as Cairo, to find a site in its oldest area on which no building had ever been built. Even the famous Ayyubid walls, which once ran alongside this site, were now covered by 5 to 6 meters of waste. This rubble dump was a repellent deformity, but it was also a stirring opportunity. And the result was that on this forsaken site, there was created a state-of-the-art green space, Al-Azhar Park. Opened 10 years ago, the park has since attracted some 17 million visitors. Their access fees produce a reinvestable annual surplus of some $800,000. But there is more to the story. Adjoining the park was one of Cairo's poorest neighborhoods, Darb al-Ahmar, its ancient ruins sheltering some 200,000 poor, marginalized inhabitants. Out of those ruins, there grew an archaeological adventure, uncovering and restoring ancient ramparts and gates, 6 historic mosques, dozens of houses and palaces. From the start, the local residents were deeply involved in this adventure. They were trained in restoration skills, and some 200 are still employed in this initiative. Others were trained to support the site and to accommodate the flow of visitors. The restoration project also included major improvements in local education and health services, in neighborhood infrastructure, in vocational training, and microcredit initiatives. The result, family earnings there have increased 1/3 faster than in the whole of Old Cairo. Literacy rates have climbed by 1/4. And today the whole area, once one of the most impoverished urban agglomerations on the planet, has become a remarkable residential, recreational, and cultural site. Similar stories can be told about other places in the developing world, where historic cities can be among the poorest, often serving as makeshift transition spaces from rural poor populations to becoming city dwellers. Our Aga Khan Historic Cities program was created to address these needs. It has now completed 20 major projects in 10 countries, with a capital investment of over $190 million. One compelling example is the restoration in Delhi of the 16th century tomb of the first Mughal emperor, Humayun, and its surrounding gardens and monuments. A grand urban space has been created there, covering over 150 hectares, hosting over 2 million visitors annually. In Afghanistan, comparable restoration efforts in Kabul involve 30 buildings and public spaces, including the historic Babur Gardens and the Mausoleum of Timur Shah. And nearby in northern Pakistan, we have worked to restore and repurpose a series of historic buildings, forts and palaces along the ancient Silk Route. Another interesting initiative has been in the high mountains of Central Asia to restore and enhance traditional water systems. Some 3,000 projects to date have rehabilitated old irrigation canals and related systems for bringing water from melting glaciers and snowfields to over 1 million people. And they have also improved water management structures through local water user associations. The impact has been impressive, not only on human health and agriculture, but also in reducing conflict over scarce resources. A continent away in Mali, the restoration of ancient mud mosques in Mopti, Djenné, and Timbuktu also involved close collaboration with government officials and local craftspeople, some employing age-old mud-building skills. And I could cite other instructive examples from Kenya, Syria, or Tajikistan, from Mostar to Samarkand. All across these highly diversified situations, moreover, social inputs have been critical, including innovations in water and land management, new educational and medical facilities, vocational training, and nascent microtourism and microfinance projects. But let me conclude by mentioning a different sort of example, one that demonstrates how the work of protecting cultural heritage in the developing world can resonate powerfully in the developed world, and sometimes in surprising ways. I learned this at first hand. After decades, when our energies had extended over dozens of international frontiers, I was reminded 10 years ago that a classic preservation challenge was growing right under our own noses, in the heart of the French countryside. I refer to the Domaine de Chantilly, home since the Middle Ages of leading French families, rivals, allies, and even members of the royal house. The domaine includes its beautiful chateau, its famous grand stables, and its superb gardens, the oldest of which were originally designed by Le Nôtre, reportedly, the artist's own favorite work. And all of this, can you imagine, lies just down the road from my personal residence, a short walk away. Like so many familiar challenges, Chantilly was a noble, honored, but fading asset, with plunging visitation levels and a backlog of deferred maintenance. There was no collaboration amongst the key stakeholders, and not even an attempt to share a vision of the future. One person who appreciated the importance of cultural heritage was the Duke of Aumale, son of the last French king. He inherited the domain in 1830 and rebuilt it to house his many treasures, including an antique painting collection that is second in size only to that of the Louvre. And he bequeathed it to the Institut de France in 1884. And he did that on purpose. He didn't want to give it to the French government. And that's true. That's why he chose the Institut. However, it was not until a century later that the Institut made it a priority to revitalize the domain, and I was invited to become part of the response. The Institute and I quickly agreed that a short-range burst of attention was not the answer. We needed a long-term plan, and we also agreed to build on the principle of public-private partnership. Increasingly, we realized the success of cultural projects in the developed world and the developing world alike requires a variety of actors animated by a robust spirit of cooperation and an overriding ethic of partnership. And so it was at Chantilly in December 2005 that a partnership agreement was signed between the Institut de France and a new private foundation, one that includes both government and private contributors. Operating under my presidency, the Foundation was assigned the responsibility over a fixed period of 20 years to preserve and promote the entire cultural area of Chantilly as an international model of heritage management. That 20-year period is half over, but already the Foundation has overseen extensive physical renovations while also improving reception and visitation facilities. We have expanded publicity, and we have created a rich program of cultural events. And we also re-established a unique horse museum, surprise, surprise, within the Grand Stables, reinforcing the historic place of Chantilly as one of Europe's great equestrian centers. Meanwhile, the flow of visitors to Chantilly has increased by 50%. By next year, we expect to welcome 500,000 visitors, making the whole initiative financially self-sustaining for the first time. From this base, we intend now to involve even more stakeholders and supporters, building an ever stronger base on broad local support. As we do so, I know we can learn from many of you who have faced similar challenges. Planning ahead for the long term, sustainability is critical. At Chantilly and elsewhere, our plans have included permanent service facilities, a museum perhaps, or a scholarly research center, a children's library, or a training workshop, so that their eventual income streams, along with public access fees, can provide reinvestable income. But the real requirement, the sine qua non, is building a constituency for sustainability, including an engaged local community. Let me conclude by underscoring my conviction that the work of cultural heritage is more critical today than ever before. In the developing and developed worlds alike, societies are plunging into an increasingly bewildering future, at an ever-accelerating pace. At such a time, and on occasions such as this, it is important that we commit ourselves ever more ardently to the essential work of cultural heritage as a powerful contributor to improving the quality of life for the entire human community. Thank you.
Your Highness, thank you very much indeed for a really inspiring talk to open our conference. I believe that the messages that you have espoused through your examples are ones that we will all strive to follow, to understand. And underpinning the work that we're trying to do today through our conference and through our manifesto is ensuring that the value of work on cultural heritage is sustainably enabling and transforming society. It really was one of the most inspiring talks, I think, that I have heard, and I'm sure that others will join me in anticipating that this will be the theme that we will all strive to follow. Can I now turn to our next presentation, which is by way of a video. This is Irina Bukova, who is the Director General of UNESCO, initially accepted our invitation to address this conference, and she was to have been here, but she's had to remain in Paris for a day more of the UNESCO Executive Board, which should have finished yesterday, but she's got to be there today. So she has sent her formal apologies, and she's sent us a video message, which I hope will now be presented.
His Royal Highness the Duke of Gloucester, His Highness Prince Karim Aga Khan, ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to send this message of support and congratulations on the occasion of the 50th anniversary of ICOMOS and ICOMOS UK. UNESCO and ICOMOS are driven by the same powerful conviction that humanity's cultural heritage carries outstanding universal significance, that this heritage is a wellspring of identity, a force for dialogue and peace. This conviction has never been so important at a time when cultural heritage and diversity are under attack from violent extremism, from the war crimes of cultural cleansing. These are challenges to the idea of humanity as a single community. These are challenges to the inspiration that created UNESCO 70 years ago at the Institute of Civil Engineers in London. Over the last 5 decades, our two organizations have worked hand in hand to advocate for the protection of heritage worldwide, helping bring to fruition the very concept of World Heritage, shaping a new global vision of humanity's shared heritage. I wish to thank ICOMOS for its tireless leadership through charters, resolutions and guidelines, most recently the Cultural Heritage Manifesto launched by ICOMOS UK. Thanks to our common efforts, the new 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, agreed by world leaders last month during the General Assembly session in New York, recognizes culture and heritage as enablers of sustainable human development and more lasting peace. This is precisely the vision of humanity united in all its diversity, sharing values, a past and a future, and I wish to thank each of you for the strength you bring to taking this forward with us, with UNESCO. Happy anniversary to ICOMOS.
And at the end of her message, Mrs. Bukova referred to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, which was agreed last month. And I'd just like to amplify some of her remarks a little. Her short statement reflects almost half a decade of work by UNESCO, which perhaps deserves more attention. In 2000, the 8 Millennium Development Goals were agreed by declaration at the United Nations Millennium Summit. All 189 United Nations member states at that time committed to help achieve the goals related to poverty alleviation, education, gender equality, health and environmental sustainability. The surprise omission of these goals was cultural heritage, which UNESCO had confidently assumed would be included. And it's always been agreed that these goals would be reviewed in 2015. And so UNESCO, and particularly Mrs. Bukova and Francesco Banderin, as Assistant Director General of Culture, over 5 years promoted the need to include cultural heritage in the next goals. Last month, the new Sustainable Development Goals were launched. There are 17 goals, and although not one is headed cultural heritage, it's there in those goals, as Mrs. Bukova indicated, as an enabler of sustainable human development. This is very, very good news. So I think this is something that we can come back to this afternoon in our discussion sessions. I'd now like to introduce Emilia Schiacitano, who is going to be talking to us about who is the Policy Officer, Cultural Heritage, Economy of Culture in the European Union, who's going to be talking to us about the EU's cross-cutting approach to cultural heritage. Emilia.
Your Royal Highness, Your Highness, Mr. David Thackeray, President of ICOMOS UK, and Mr. Gregory Atkinson, Chairman of HARUP. It's a great honor for me to be here today to celebrate the 50th anniversary of UK National Committee of the International Council on Museums and Sites. And I would like to thank ICOMOS UK for inviting the European Commission not only to celebrate the outstanding past achievements that ICOMOS has accomplished in half a century, but also to share our visions for the future we want, and the role that heritage can play to build the society of tomorrow. Cultural heritage is becoming a key area of European cultural policy. The political interest is testified by this long list of documents adopted, and I stress adopted in less than 2 years, by the European institutions. From 2 Council conclusions adopted under the Italian and the Greek presidency of the EU, the Commission communication of July 2014, to the more recent resolution of the European Parliament adopted this September. Well, it's an impressive list, considering that we have to go back to 1994 to find another document adopted by the Council of the EU. So, meaning 20 years. It is May 2014, in fact, when the EU cultural minister raised attention on the benefits that cultural heritage, both tangible and intangible and digital, brings to our culture, the environment, the economy, and for society as a whole, and unveiled the transversal and multidimensional nature of heritage as a strategic resource for sustainable Europe, which cuts across several EU policies beyond the cultural policy, environment, cohesion, and policies, and tourism. Why do we need to recall the benefits of heritage for our economy, our society, and the environment? I'm sure that none of you here need to be convinced that heritage is the soul of our cities, the mirror of our history, the source of our identity, the foundation stone of our civic pride and sense of belonging. It's a major factor in defining Europe's place in the world and its attractiveness as a place to live, work, and visit. But we know well that many other people do need to be convinced. Not because they do not like cultural heritage, of course. They enjoy cultural heritage, simply out of indifference. And also because they are not aware of the real value of heritage. Indifference, I would like to stress that indifference it's only apparently a minor threat for heritage. Heritage is not a simple passive inheritance. The key for its survival is precisely in keeping alive the wish of every generation to rediscover and reinterpret it. And this is a wish that needs to be constantly renewed. Its maintenance depends on our capacity to renew people's sense of belonging and responsibility by placing it at the heart of community interaction. But when public budgets for culture and heritage are being slashed, when digitization shakes up traditional models of access and participation in culture, when the transmission of heritage skills and knowledge among generations is interrupted, even if monuments are still standing, their meaning and value and the knowledge they embed risks to be neglected and soon lost forever. As we have seen recently, and it's sad, we appreciate the value of heritage all the more when it's under threat, when it becomes the target of vandalism, defacement, and even destruction. When heritage is under attack, when it's being looted and destroyed, like in Iraq and Syria, not only the culture of the people who live there, but also our common values as human beings are under attack. And let me quote Madame Bokova in her recent intervention at the European Parliament. The transmission of our history is a vital need, essential to human life, like breathing or drinking. Accepting that this is destroyed, it's already giving up a part of humanity. That's why we need Europe taking action. because heritage value is both local and European. Millennia of creativity, of intellectual debate, of exchanges and dialogue among civilizations, but also of wars and tragedies, have made Europe a continent of cultural heritage. It has been forged over time, but also across borders and communities. Our heritage is made up of local stories, which together make the history of Europe. In a few words, we are only the custodians of this shared heritage and this shared treasure. And looking after our heritage is therefore our common responsibility. And I want to be clear, and the treaty are clear, that the EU role is in supplementing and complementing the action of member states. Heritage protection is primarily a matter for national, regional, and local authorities, but the European Union can and must help. And now is the time where we need to renew and innovate our policies. The cultural heritage system has remained unchanged for centuries, but now it needs to adapt to a changing reality and respond quickly to emerging needs. This is why, responding to the call of the Council for the mainstreaming of cultural heritage in national and European policies, and the development of a strategic approach to cultural heritage, last year the European Commission presented a strategic vision for heritage called Towards an Integrated Approach to Cultural Heritage for Europe. We propose a way forward for enriching the value of cultural heritage, tangible and intangible further. This strategy is our roadmap for the next 5 years. We then stress that the preservation of our heritage, it is not in contradiction with its becoming a part of the daily life of our communities. Its very survival depends on historic sites becoming centers of knowledge, focal points of creativity and culture, and places of community interaction and social integration. And Europe can help the heritage sector to move with the times, thanks to a range of EU policies, programs, and fundings. Under the former cultural program, more than 130 cooperation projects in the area of cultural heritage received funding for a total of 38 million euros. Heritage is one of the most represented sectors among the projects selected so far in the Creative Europe program, the new program supporting cultural and creative industries in Europe. We are promoting as well standards, high standards and high quality skills in conservation practice every year by awarding the European Union Prize for Cultural Heritage Europa Nostra Award. This year, 263 projects competed for the prize from 29 countries. This is the largest number of applications received in the prize history. And to me, this means that the cultural heritage field in Europe is incredibly dynamic. With action like the European Capitals of Culture, the European Heritage Days, we are stimulating the whole cycle of cultural production, preservation, awareness raising. And through the Europe for Citizens program and the European Heritage Label, we are engaging European citizens in a deeper reflection on the roots, the construction and meaning of our identity as European as well as citizens of 28 nation states. The Commission also provides direct support to cultural heritage through the structural funds. In the previous programming period, 2007-2013, 6 billion euros were earmarked for cultural-led investment in the EU member states. Around half of that funding has been devoted to cultural heritage. We are therefore happy to announce that in the current programming period, 2014-2020, European support will be even stronger. Member states, in fact, have chosen to invest in culture, and heritage is the most prominent cultural sector. We estimate that 4.77 billion will be dedicated to the protection of cultural heritage versus 3.2 billion in the previous programming period. For 2016-2017, there will be also a substantial increase in investment in cultural heritage research and innovation from Horizon 2020 program, bringing it more to than 100 million euros. Europe can also, can and must protect heritage in war zones. Since 2014, we have been actively supporting cultural heritage protection in Syria. More recently, we have allocated €1 billion to address the crisis in Syria and Iraq. We have banned imports of cultural goods from those two countries. We work with international partners, especially UNESCO, whose expertise in this field is precious. This is how the European Union is turning into practice the mainstreaming principle contained in the EU Treaty, taking into account cultural aspects under the different EU policies and programs. But these need to be developed at all levels. This is why in our communication we invited member states and stakeholders to make the most of the significant support for heritage available under EU instruments and progress towards a more integrated approach at national and EU level, and ultimately make Europe a laboratory for heritage-based innovation. In order to make this integrated approach work, we need to develop innovative governance model where public and private actors, citizens, and stakeholders participate in the maintenance and management of cultural heritage. We see this as a condition for making heritage part of a broad-based long-term development plans. And we can't forget that heritage is a bridge between communities and a path towards personal identity building. We need to help communities to take ownership of heritage management, to make it part of their daily life, part of the sustainable development of their society, to build a constituency for sustainability, as was previously stressed by His Highness the Aga Khan. How we can do that? We have just started to work with the EU member states on improving the participatory governance of heritage policies. There is a wealth of good practices across the EU from which we can learn, and I'm certain that the manual of good practice for policymakers and cultural heritage institutions that the member state expert will produce by the end of next year will be extremely useful. We also need our policy to be more effective, more efficient, and more sustainable. Therefore, promoting evidence-based policy making and strengthening the links between culture, research, and innovation are of utmost importance for the future. To give you one example, EU-wide comparable data on the social and economic impact of heritage policies are still lacking. And in modern policy making, lack of data is fatal. As cultural operators, no. When it comes to convincing decision makers to invest in culture, even the most compelling data may not guarantee success. However, without any data at all, we are bound to fail from the start. This is why we have renewed the work on cultural statistics in partnership with Eurostat, which has given the first result in these months, and recently supported the project Cultural Heritage Counts for Europe, which mapped the existing research at EU level on the impact of cultural heritage on our economies and society, and confirmed our view that cultural heritage do produce an impact on employment, identity, regional attractiveness, creativity and innovation, economy, climate change, quality of life, education, lifelong learning, and social cohesion. A couple of years ago, we used to say heritage is at a crossroad. How many times we heard this? Now we can say that the turning point is behind us. And the most important, the research confirmed that we choose the right path. And the recent resolution of the European Parliament confirms that an implementation of an integrated approach towards cultural heritage for Europe is not a choice, it's a need. We therefore welcome the call launched by ICOMOS UK for an integrated and cross-cutting approach to cultural heritage in its manifesto. And ICOMOS, by promoting best practice among heritage and conservation professionals, by encouraging a wide understanding of the scope and value of cultural heritage, can play a key role in making this vision for heritage a reality. Let's say we launch this call to member states and stakeholders let's say that ICOMOS is the first to respond. You are the ones who can turn principles into action, nurture and enrich our expertise, our know-how, our common capital. You are the perfect partners for this new path. And thanks to your work for higher standards in the conservation of cultural heritage, the chain of knowledge and experience will not be broken. Only in this way can heritage be a living force. Only in this way can heritage root us in our past, and only in this way can heritage shape our future. The Commission supports you and wishes you every success.